Good day YouTube, welcome to my channel Pottering Around with Nick, your #1 pot star. In my previous videos I showed you how to make a beautiful wooden pot such as this. However, in future videos I'm going to show you how to make a beautiful pot such as this. Isn't that spectacular? Say good morning. Meow. To make such a beautiful pot, we are going to be needing some additional tools. And the tools we require are bar clamps. This video I'm going to show you how to make these bar clamps. I hope you enjoy.
Right, here we are at the bench. I have a dowel in my hand. It's a 12mm dowel, half an inch, maybe a little under half an inch. I have a piece of wood which is 2.5 foot, 75 centimeters long. It's reasonably straight grained, but it does have a knot. Well, we don't want knots in our bar clamps because that's going to weaken them. So we're going to have to cut that knot out. Besides which, I don't need bar clamps 75 centimeters long. I find the long ones a little bit too difficult to use or clunky on the bench. They occupy a lot of space. So I'm just going to cut that knot out on the table saw. The piece which is left behind is going to be used. We're going to make some wedges with that, and the bar clamp will be about 48 centimeter long. Alright, off to the table saw. Here we go, just measuring it up again just to make sure. Measure twice, cut once, and 48 centimeter. That's what we want. Call it half a meter. Here we go, first cut of the day. Get rid of that knot. Ah, go, be gone, you wicked knot. Alright, we're back at the bench, and I'm just going to plane it up a little bit, make it smooth, look a bit pretty. Just doing this in fast time. You could take a belt sander as well, but I like a little bit of planing. And just plane up the other side too. And here I realize I'm planing the wrong direction. Turn the wood around and we'll plane up that side. That's a lot better. The blade could have been a bit sharper, but here we go, planing away. And eventually we'll have a nice smooth piece of wood, nicely dimensioned, all the saw marks taken out from the sawmills. This was a leftover piece of wood from a previous project. Alright, our next task is to put some holes through this piece of wood. I need a hole about here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe it's 8. I'm just going 20 mil from the end of the plank, and I'm just marking out 50, 50, all the way down the plank. That should be about right. Alright, there we go. So we've got a lot of the spaces marked out. Just measuring the width of the plank. The plank width is about 25 millimeter. Call it an inch. I've set my marking gauge at half that, so I'm just scribing a center line. Make it a little bit easier to see. Put a pencil line down there. Yep, my pencil's a bit short. You know how it is, the economy is tight. Right, I'm just going to put some pilot holes down there, mostly because I'm doing this by hand, and I want to be able to make sure that it's reasonably vertical. I could have used a drill press, I do have a drill press, but I'm trying to show you here that it can be done without drill presses and fancy equipment. So here's just the pilot holes. get all the pilot holes through. Then I'm going to drill it with a 12mm drill bit all the way through. Here we go. Let's get it all the way through these planks. And again, I should have put a hard piece of wood underneath to stop the blowout happening at the back. But these are only clamps, it's not spaceships, so you don't have to worry too much. The only people that's going to see your clamps is the people on YouTube. Perhaps I should have done it a bit better than this. It's not going to change the functionality. Right, so here we go. We have our piece of wood. Now I'm going to mark up the surfaces of this piece of wood because I want to be able to put them back together again. I know for sure that I haven't drilled those holes perfectly. Doesn't really matter, but as long as I can put them back together in the same way they came off. So I'm just drawing some squiggly lines on these faces so that our next stage, or after our next stage, I can put them back together again. And squiggly lines are the best sort of thing. Random squiggly lines. They help you put it back together again. Alright, here we go. I'm cutting it into 4 pieces. These 4 pieces will form the bars, and they will have nice holes through them. And ripping on the table saw. 1, 2, and here comes 3 and 4. Excellent. So here we have them, and I've ripped them 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm just going to show you here, the dowels can go through the holes quite freely if they are lined up nicely. Alright, here we go. Goes through that hole. It'll go through the other hole. Just test fitting that I haven't done anything ridiculously silly. Here we go. It'll go through all those holes. Pretty convinced.
Next task is to cut some dowels. I'm going to cut these at about 70mm.
Next we are going to cut some dowels. I'm just going to cut them to length. I'm going to cut these to about 75mm. 75mm. Call them 3 inches. Get the old vice dog bench thing out, and I'll just cut it by hand. Couple of strokes with the saw, and of course when you're on YouTube everything drops onto the floor, so every piece falls to the floor, but with a little bit of editing we don't have to show how I pick up all the bits that fall on the floor. See that bit there, it went on the floor. Right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 dowels, and I'll show you how they're going to fit. Here's our clamps. So these 2 bars is going to make 1 clamp. I'm just placing the dowels at the extremes so we can sort of get an idea of how this is all going to fit together.
So that's 1 clamp. All we need on this clamp is the wedges. The other clamp.
And here's the other one. I'll just put some dowels into it. And here we can quite clearly see the concept. Now we have 2 bar clamps. The next task is going to be to cut some wedges. Here we are at the table saw. I'm just doing this freehand. The angle of the wedge is not important. I don't know, I've got a 10-15 degree angle on here. The sharper the wedge, the more force it can apply. I find this type of angle to be quite adequate. As we tap the wedges in, it will apply more force. But obviously the sharper the wedge, the more tapping you need to install that wedge. So I've cut them at 15 degrees or so. Here I'm just showing as the wedges slide up against each other, they are going to apply a force in the opposite direction, or well, let's say at 90 degrees. So as they move up and down, these wedges are going to push my hands away from each other. But we need twice as many wedges as this. We need 4 wedges. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to rip it down the center, and then I'll have 4 wedges. So off we go to the table saw. Two becomes 1, or the other way around actually. 1 becomes 2. And they're a little bit long, so I'm just going to trim off the pointy bits, make them a bit shorter, makes it easier to handle. 1, 2, number 3, and here comes number 4. Right, there we go, 4 wedges. It looks like I'm thinking a little bit of a pot. If you watch my first video, you'll see how to make a pot. My second video was how to make a jig, to make a plank, to make a pot. And these planks look very pot-like. So as we push these planks backwards and forwards, we slide them against each other. They are going to make a force at 90 degrees to that surface. These surfaces, we need them to be sort of smooth and slippery so that they can slide easily. So our next task is going to be to smoothen up these surfaces, and I'm going to use my jig that I made last week. Here we go. Remember this one? This was my second video. Here's my little jig, and I'm just going to adjust it so that this little wedge can fit into the jig, and we can plane up these surfaces and make them nice and smooth and shiny so they can slide against each other. So we put it in the jig. I'm just lining it up so that it's up against the plane fence. I'll tighten it up. So here we have it in position. Just make sure it's nice and tight, not moving. We don't need this shim because I want this wedge to be at 90 degrees, so I'm going to remove this shim. This shim is designed to tilt the plane. I don't need that. I want a 90 degree surface on this wedge. So the wedge goes up against the work fence, the plane is up against the plane fence. Oops. And we just plane it away until the plane stops cutting, and then we know we have a nice smooth surface. If you want to know how to make this jig, please go back and look at my second video, making a jig. Very useful little jig this. And there we go, one surface done, quick and easy. Turn it around, quickly plane up the other surface. And there we have one wedge done.
Here we go. Perfect.
Right, we'll just do a few more in rapid time. There we go. I was planing a wrong direction on that one, so that surface didn't come up that smooth. But there we go, nice smooth surface on that one. Let's check it out, and here we can see that that plank doesn't move on a flat surface. My fingers move, but not the plank. And I'll just do another one very quickly. Flat and smooth. But if you don't have a jig, this is what you can do. Put the plank in the vise and just give it a few rubs with the plane and plane it off. So you don't need the jig. The jig is just a useful thing. You can do it with the plane and a vise. And we have nice, smooth, shiny surface. Let me show you another one. Now I'm just going to clean up our bars, take out the saw marks with the belt sander, make them look a bit pretty. I'm not going to remove the markings, the squiggly lines I put on earlier. There's still another step before I do that. Perhaps I should have done it before I did this sanding up. You'll see why. You'll see the next stage. Here we have the bars with the squiggly lines lined up. I've put some dowels through it. You can see how nicely those squiggly lines are lining up, so we know that those two bars fit together to make the one clamp. If we look, we can see the holes line up perfectly. The problem is, I know for sure I have not drilled those holes perfectly straight, so only the ones that fit next to each other will actually allow a dowel to pass through easily. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to very quickly put some saw marks into these bars, so that when I put them together on a glue up, I will have them in the right way around. And I'm just going to put a saw mark here. Here's just a number. That's my number 1 bar, so I'm just going to put one saw mark, and I'm going to put it in 3 places along the bar, sort of random, one at each end, one in the middle, and one at the other end. So now I know that those 2 bars go together, and that forms one clamp. I've got some nice deep kerf marks in there, so I can take it apart, mix them around, but when I come to use it, I can always keep the one bar together with the other bar. The other one, just put a dowel through it quickly, hold them in place, and on this one is going to be clamp number 2, so I'm going to put 2 little saw marks into it. Here's the one, here's the other. So I've got 2 marks on that end. I'll put 2 marks in the middle. And I'll put 2 marks on the very other end as well. I guess you guessed it. Now we're taking those ugly pen marks away, those squiggly lines. We'll just sand them up, make it look pretty, and then we'll have nice clean looking bars but we've still got those kerf lines in there so that we can always line up the right bar in pairs. Nobody likes their wedges to be dirty, so here I've just got the sanding belt. I'm just going to clean up the wedges just on their surfaces, take out the saw marks. Dirty wedges are my least favourite thing. Nice clean ones is what you want. Here's the progress. We've got one clamp with 2 bars and 2 wedges. We have another clamp, 2 bars, 2 wedges, and of course the dowels. Now I'm going to make some, let's call them spacers. These spacers need to be able to go between the wedge and the workpiece. I'm just going to plane up this piece of wood quickly, make it smooth and flat with my home built wooden plane. Very intuitive to use. Oh, that was the wrong way. Here we go, go the right way. Tap the blade a bit deeper. And here we have nicely planed up, squared up piece of wood.
Right, got the drill. It's the same 12mm.
I've drawn a line on this piece of wood from corner to corner, and along that line I've put 3 dots, and I'm going to drill 3 holes. There are 12mm holes, the right size to fit the dowel. I'm trying to go as vertically as possible, but it's not really that critical. There goes the one hole. Here's the second hole, and you can see how they are slanting across that piece of wood. And the third hole goes through here very nicely. We'll see how these spaces are going to fit. I'll show you, don't worry, just hold on a little bit longer. Back with the belt sander, we'll just quickly clean up all that blowout, especially out the back of the piece of wood. And now we have this piece of wood with 3 holes which are slanting from the one corner to the other corner. The middle hole is sort of in the center of the piece of wood. The ones on the left and on the right are a little bit off center. I need to split this into 4 pieces. So we're going to go take it off to the table saw. Here we go, piece number 1, piece number 2, and piece number 3 and 4. Well, I sort of messed up there a little bit because piece number 4 was too thin. So, off camera, I just made another piece. So here's the clamps. We are getting very much near the end now. Here's our spacers. They fit on the clamp, the one dowel, and you can see we can move them so that they can be, fit the workpiece, and you don't have to wander around looking for scraps. Well, yeah, you see we got to put the clamp on the right way around so the lines, those little kerf marks, line up. And here we can see they are lined up, and our spacers are in place. And here's our wedges, which are going to fit between the bars, and as those wedges move, you can see that they will put pressure on the glue up piece that we'll have between the wedge and the spacer. Here's a close-up view of what's going to happen with these wedges. See, as we tap the wedges in, it's going to force the workpiece towards the other end of the clamp and apply pressure. All the pieces together, and we like our clamps to be nice and shiny, so I'm just going to put some furniture wax on here. Okay, I'm not too worried about being shiny, but the wax will stop the glue from sticking to the clamps, at least help. And here's all the bits, nicely polished and shiny. And we have nice greasy, slippery wedges. Everybody loves a slippery wedge. Just clean up a little bit. And here I'm going to show you how we're going to use this bar clamp. The bar clamp's laying underneath those boards. These two boards is what I want to join in this instance. The bottom bars of the clamp are sitting on the bottom, the top is removed. The dowels are at the spacing that we require. I'm just spreading some glue across the top here on this end of the board, which I want to glue to the other board. This is just for an example. Of course, you can glue up multiple pieces at once if you're making, for example, cutting boards. Or in the future, I'm going to show you how to use these clamps to make a beautiful, unique flower pot. Once the glue is spread, we are just going to tilt the board and fit it onto the other board, push it up. Here we go. And line it up with the fingers. Make sure the edges are lined up, wiggle it about a bit, spread the glue. Then we're going to fit the top bars. This is top bar number 1, just checking. Those little curve marks are there nicely so we don't get mixed up. That goes with the paired number 1 at the bottom. There we go, beautiful. A little bit tricky sometimes. I should really beveled over the edges of the dowels. That would make it slide in a bit more easily or line up a bit more easily, particularly the first dowel. There we go, that's nice. And then we're going to fit the wedges. Yep, let's just get them the right way round. Yeah, look at that. And we'll give them a little gentle tap. Here I've got a small masonry hammer. I find it works very well for this type of wedge because it's very small and it just fits the wedge nicely. And we'll have to put the wedges on the other clamp as well. And we'll start to see how the glue is squeezing out of that gap as we tighten these wedges. With my one finger on my right hand, I'm just holding the back wedge while I'm tapping in the wedge on the wedge which is closer to me. It's not looking too bad. Little bit of alignment there. Let's just get the clamps a bit straighter. Oh, yep. See, that was a little bit out. No problem. I'll just tighten up that wedge. Oh, a little bit of fumbling here. Let's tighten it up from this side rather. There we go. Gentle taps. The wedge is sliding, and as it's sliding, it's pushing up against that joint. So if you've liked this video or if you learned something, please show me, put a like. If you want to see how I'm going to make a flower pot in the future, please subscribe. And if you have any comments, I welcome them all. Put your comments in the bottom. There we go. Now we're tightening up these wedges, a little bit of a stronger hammering action. And we can see how the glue is squeezing out. And it's not even going to move anymore. And here you can see the advantages of these clamps. Because they are not clamping the one side or the other side, they are clamping both sides at the same time. It tends to hold the boards flat. Here we're looking at the bottom. We can see how nicely the glue is squeezed out, and those two boards are pretty flat against each other. Here we are the next day, removing the clamps. You just tap them. Those little wedges, they shoot out like bullets. We remove the wedges, we remove the bars. Little bit of glue. So we'll just tap off the clamps there. And here we have the glued joint. Beautiful. We did miss a little bit of glue on here, but we can just sand that up and clean it up.
Well, thanks for watching. I hope that was entertaining. I've showed you how to make bar clamps that you can use in a future project to make a beautiful pot like this. Isn't that fantastic? Beautiful. Say goodbye.
Not the malware.